Hey everyone, hi, welcome. Today the plan is to talk about all the books I read in December, and I did have quite a pattern in December, which was kind of interesting. All of the books felt like they started off more promising than they ended. So the first half of the book tended to be more strong than the second half. I still had some really excellent reads among the books, and I think I'm going to actually divide it into that kind of those categories in regards to, first I'm going to talk about the books that I felt started off stronger and more promising at the beginning, and then I'll move into the books that I really enjoyed and didn't fit that pattern. Oh, Harry's here. If you're new here, then hi, welcome. I am Shelly and I love books and reading. Sometimes what I do on my channel is I get ready while I talk about books and my thoughts about books and all of that. You get it. This is why I have a makeup brush in my hand and I have a kit of makeup to assist in the getting ready process. And I like doing that because it's relaxing for me and it's something that I like to get done anyways, like getting ready for the day. And so it's a really good time to also chat about the books that I read. And also today I'm going to be giving you a little update on my first week of work because it's difficult for me to separate my personal life with my bookish life because they are all enmeshed with one another. It's probably not the right verb for it, but that's all right. So we'll start. I will try in post, my show notes. I'll try and leave a timestamp for those who are not interested in the life stuff and you just want to get to the books. I'll leave a timestamp down below. So this was my first full week of work. Today is Saturday and I started work on Monday and boy, it kicked my butt. It kicked my butt. I'm getting up about 5:30 every day. It's a lot to process. My husband was so sweet in saying that our lives basically went from 0 to 60 because he also found work. And so it's been interesting because he is getting things ready in regards to setting our youngest. I have two sons. I have two little boys. My youngest is 4 years old and we're setting him up with preschool. My husband has taken over doing homework with our 6-year-old and it's just been a lot of moving pieces. My husband's been cooking dinner, which has been lovely. We have been collaborating on what we're gonna do for dinner and it's just been kind of chaotic. I think that's probably the best word for it. And then amid this chaos, I'm like processing this new work that I'm doing, which I feel really grateful for. And I find really challenging, both emotionally and physically and intellectually. Less intellectually, but mostly emotionally and physically. It's demanding in its own right. And yeah, so it just feels like a lot, like a whirlwind. And every day I come home and process. And sometimes when I'm processing, I'm crying, but I know that the tears are helping me get through what I'm getting through so I can come out on the other side and feel like I can do this. But it really feels like a test in patience. Oh, and I feel like I'm coming to you all put together, but just know that it's been a mess. It's been a huge mess. And I am someone who tends to lean on the crux of worry. And I try not to do that as much. And I let myself sort of be who I am and process the way that I want to process and get through what I need to get through in order to come out on the other side clear-minded and feeling empowered. But this week has just really taken its toll on me. And so it's been a lot. So but I'm kind of leading it somewhere. Here's the thing is that even though work has been just so much, like an explosion of information and just words, I'll back up a tiny bit. To give you all some context, I wanted to say that the work I've done before for the majority of my career, my professional career, in the vein that I've always wanted to do my career, is that I have been a librarian and I've been a teacher, and those paths have converged at points. And that is the work that I'm doing right now is definitely in that same path. It's in that same vein. And as doing both of those types of work, as any work, you build strength. Like, you have your strong points, and there are techniques that you use, and there's like this toolkit that you have at your disposal. And I know that I let that toolkit get a little dusty and a little rusty and a little neglected, although, I am a mother and I do this kind of work, books and reading here. But it did get a little bit rusty, the very specific skills that one needs to do any work in the world and that you haven't done in a while. So as I've gotten my tools out and my toolkit out, I feel really proud of myself because I'm processing things quite a bit faster than I did when I first started doing this kind of work. However, it is like this learning curve of just you're like, oh yeah, I have that tool. That tool is right here. I'm holding it, and you're like, this is how I use it. And so and this is how I process, when X happens and when Y happens. And so it feels on the one hand really, really good to dust off those old tools and to use them again and to put them to good use. However, it also is in that dusting out process and sort of like, I'm like frantically looking through my toolbox of how to do something. In that process, it's a little bit painful. It is like, it's a little bit like I can feel myself growing. I can feel myself processing. It's been messy. It's been so messy. And so as I have experienced this week, as I've been living through this week, I am both simultaneously chaotically overwhelmed. It's like a mess. And then also like proud of where I'm ending the week, because again, I can be somebody who is a ball of nerves, a ball of just like anxiety energy. And I feel like I am not leaning on that emotion to get me through what I need to get through. Instead, I am, taking out the healthy processing tools in order to get myself to where I am right now, which is like, I'm spending time with you all. I want to be here. I'm part of the booktube community. I have been watching videos. I am enjoying all of everybody's wrap-up content. I love that booktube is still here, that we are a community, that we touch base with each other, and that things keep rolling because then I can come and make this video and tell you all about my week and let you know that things are going well, even though it's been a big ball of chaos and a lot of processing. And that you all are going to be here and saying, hey, and there's still somebody out there talking about their favorite book. There's still somebody out there giving a critique about a new release. And there's something really comforting about a community that's there doing their thing, that's here doing our thing, because I'm a part of it, and that I can just jump right in when I'm ready. And right now I'm ready, even though it's a little bit messy. So it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Okay, so now I think I've gotten all of the life stuff sort of vaguely talked about. I hope that was satisfying in some ways for those who have inquiring minds. I know that I have a lot of you who are very curious, and I don't mind talking about my work. It's just in this super public space, I would like to keep it a bit more vague. But I think you get that. Like, you get it. So, and you're so understanding. Future Shelly is yet again inserting herself because she wants to know, I want to know, what was the best read that you read this month? I really do want to know, and I wanted to get this in early so that you all can be typing away, giving me recommendations and sharing with me the greatest hits of December. Or even in the first few days of January. I would love to know. Spill the tea. Please let me know. And let's go get back to the regularly scheduled video, because I always forget to ask you at the beginning. Okay, so let's talk about the books. We're going to talk about the books that were kind of disappointing. Kind of. That's a bit, it's like they had something really good going on, and then I thought it would sort of turn out to have this juicy ending, and then for me it was like it just kind of just sort of fizzled out, and that's okay. I think that the books were intended, like written in that way, but for me it was just like it just kind of, there was just something about it just sort of tapering out and ending on a decrescendo kind of thing, if you know, musical terms. Okay, the first book, which I did a whole review about, Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice. I was so jazzed when I opened this. It was like sexy. The writing was erotic. It was about, you know, vampires, and I loved her writing. This did not turn me off to like Anne Rice's writing in the least. But there was, you know, our main character, Louis, and the way that he is learning to be a vampire. A lot of the book is set in the South in the 1800s, late 1700s, maybe early 1800s. And then it moves through time to the 70s, like present day for the book. So, you know, and we're getting Louis's like greatest hits in his life, which was really fun, because there were like these really pivotal moments in which, what is Harry chewing on? Harry! So we're getting Louis's, you know, greatest moments in his life, most pivotal moments. And it started off so strong. And then I felt like as it was wrapping up, I don't know if it was me and I lost interest, or the things that I was curious about wasn't what Anne Rice wanted to write about. Like, I really was wondering, like, I was curious about how technology maybe disrupted the vampire experience. I was curious about maybe, you know, I don't know, sort of the minutia or the day-to-day stuff about the way the world has changed and how the vampires reacted to that change. When automobiles became more popularized, how, you know, how our country and our world has shifted. And I wanted to see more of that. I think that that's what I was personally curious about. And instead what I got was, you know, Louis's personal life and intimate relationships and how that changed him and the philosophy of his life, you know, and what it means to be a vampire. And I don't think I think that I just wanted something different than what Anne Rice wanted to write about. And that's fine. It just, so as I became curious and as the book moved forward, it started to lose me ever so slightly as we inched towards the end. So yeah, but still a really good read and still really enjoyable, and didn't put me off to her writing in the least. And I would love to read more of Anne Rice. I can definitely see why she's a favorite author, why she is well loved, why she had the career that she had. But I think it just wasn't serving what I specifically was curious about. Next up, we have Autumn by Ali Smith that falls into this pattern. So here's the interesting thing. I was very excited to read Ali Smith. She sets her books in like the year in which she is living. And there's often commentary about what is going on in the moment that she is processing, essentially. And so Brexit is going on, and so there is commentary in this seasonal book about Brexit and the implications of what that means, and a bit of her thought process about this huge shift in you know, British history. And on top of that, she has this really incredible language play, this word play, and it's often quite light, quite playful. There is just this tangible sweetness to her writing, and this very intense, or not intense, this there were just some incredibly funny moments in this book. It's deadpan humor, at least in the humor that I got, and it was exploring the friendship between a young girl and an older man and the way that their friendship had developed over their lives. So here's the deal, is that I felt like it started off really strong, because immediately I was charmed by her wordplay. I was loving the humor. I was really getting invested in the characters. And then I felt like it just kind of tapered out. And again, I think this was more of a me problem, that this is the style in which Ali Smith writes. It doesn't have this explosive ending or this very intense climax and then following action and resolution. It doesn't have that. It's a quiet novel, and it's very almost meditative in the way that it plays out. And I think that this is by design, that she executed what she wanted to execute in the format that she wanted to execute it, and it's done well. But I think for me, I wanted to be able to see more of that climax and then the following action and resolution, and I just didn't get that. However, there were some scenes that were just absolutely hilarious. I thought it was so funny, and now I understand Ali Smith's style, this incredibly light-handed wordplay that is just delightful. And so I get what she's doing. I just think that I need to be in the right mindset for the next book that I pick up, because what I'm going to be getting is something a little more subtle and subdued. Another book that definitely fit the pattern of the first half, was so much stronger than the second half, was Pat Barker's The Silence of the Girls, which is a retelling of the Iliad. And I love the Iliad. That book is my jam. I want to reread it. I love that book. I love that book. And so coming into this as a retelling of the Iliad, we get the character of, oh, one sec. All right, I had to refamiliarize myself with of the main character. The main character's name is we're following one of the women who was one of the leaders in Troy, Briseis, who ends up being kidnapped. She's kidnapped by the Greeks, and she ends up becoming one of the slaves for the Greek leaders. So we are still getting this kind of sideways view of Achilles and Agamemnon and Patroclus and all of those really familiar and, dare I say, lovable characters. We're getting the female perspective of it all. And I was really enraptured by Pat Barker's sort of gross descriptions. There's descriptions of like oozy, grotesque, like disgusting, exploding body parts, and it was just fantastic. There was something really mesmerizing about that. Never thought I would say that. There was this like grotesqueness to Pat Barker's writing that really worked for me. And it was so cool to be following the women and the character of Briseis as she is a prisoner of war, and how she is getting to know the Greek camp and her role as someone who is living there against her will. And you kind of get this one foot in the women's camp, like the way the women run the camp and how they deal with their problems. And then you also get one foot in Achilles' story, or this sideways glance at Achilles' story, which I thought was really fascinating. However, the character of Briseis as the narrator has almost no growth. She does not grow or change very much. In some ways, you can make an argument that she does, but I don't think that it was pulled off very well. And so here I am getting attached to this narrator that ends up the emotional gut impact isn't about her. Even though it felt like it should be about her, instead it was about Achilles and his story, but I didn't grow attached to Achilles. And so it felt like, it just was like one of those puzzles where you think that you're looking at something and then you realize that it's something else, but it doesn't quite work. At least in my opinion. There was a lot that I liked about it. It didn't turn me off to Pat Barker's writing. I actually own another Pat Barker book. But there was something a bit askew about how the whole thing came together and the conclusion and the resolution of this novel. And it kind of put me off to that series. However, I was delighted to be back in the world of the Greeks and being back in that, like, sort of the emotional drama of Achilles. And so I do quite like retellings, I think, from this. I don't know, there was something really like charming and delightful about it that it makes me want to read more retellings of ancient, Greek history, or Greek mythology. Like, I want to read more of that. So I think instead of reading another Pat Barker book, she's more steered me towards, let me read something by Madeline Miller. Let me read something by another author who has tried to retell Homer's stories, because there was something about that was quite magical. Let me just finish up this makeup, and then I'm gonna give you all of my attention, because I just think I want to talk with you all and not really be distracted by the makeup today. I'm having an interesting week, so let me just finish it up and then I will give you all of my attention. So at the very beginning of the month, I was really enjoying fantasy books, and so I picked up 2 fantasy books, and they both in some ways didn't work out super well for me. The first one was Maggie Stiefvater's Call Down the Hawk, which is set in the same world as her Raven Boys series, and we are following characters from the Raven Boys that didn't get a lot of attention, and she is growing and developing those characters. We also get a whole new set of characters, and she definitely grows the world. There is a lot of commentary about art and what art means and forgeries and copies, and she definitely takes those concepts and uses that to fuel the book. Now here's the deal, is that I think that she turned up the dial in her writing for all of the things that I don't enjoy. There was more action, there was more world building in not necessarily the way that I enjoyed, and there was more weirdness, and it was a bit more violent, I would say. So more action, more violent, and world building in a way that didn't quite sit with me. And then she was using this trope of a cat and mouse chase that I just did not get along with. So she turned up the volume on everything that I disliked, and then she turned down the volume on the friendships that were developed in the Raven Boys, the interpersonal relationships, and the sort of youthful quality that those books had. It's almost like she went from young adult to new adult, and I don't think I care for new adult writing so much, whereas I really enjoyed sort of the light interplay of the friendships in the Raven Boys that was definitely sitting in the realm of young adult. So if you can't guess already, Call Down the Hawk did not work for me. And I actually decided not to continue with this series. And then I read Tasha Suri's The Jasmine Throne. Now, this was interesting because it was set in a world that was very nature-based. It was a lot of, actually the things that were going on that were wrong in the world, at least at the very beginning, there are these people that are getting sick, and it's basically they're turning into plants almost, and so there's this sickness that's spreading and going around. We have this main character who is assigned to be a guard to a princess. Actually, give me a moment. Okay, I was just looking up names. So we have Priya, who is assigned to be a guard to the Princess Malini, and from there is a lot of tension and a lot of commentary about female empowerment. The tension comes from Malini, the princess, her brother, who's evil, is making some horrid choices in order to rule his kingdom. And I think that the premise of it was set up so well. There was so much tension, especially about gender roles and about female empowerment and violent crimes against women, that I was like here for it. I was like, Tasha Suri, you are writing in my language. I love this so much. And then on top of it being set in this really natural world. And then I felt like somewhere around the 2/3 mark, when Tasha Suri was just trying to put the pieces together in order to get to the conclusion, I felt like I could just see all of the moves It was like I was looking at I was playing chess with her, and I could see the 17 moves that she was going to do in order to get to the checkmate. And it was just all about playing the moves. And I don't love that feeling. I like a little bit of surprise. I like that part where your breath is taken away. You see a twist, the twist comes out of nowhere. I really value like a great surprise. I don't have another word for it. And it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. And so I would say that this was like one of the books that started off the strongest and fell from grace the most because it had so much hope in it. And that's okay. That's okay. Also, some of the magic in it didn't quite work for me. I was like, okay, so this is happening? It's like, I don't know. I can believe a lot in a fantasy world, but this just seems like it's put there for a very specific reason. Like some of the plot points, some of the magic, it's like you wrote that in order to do something extremely specific, and it didn't quite work. So, suffice to say, I don't think it's a bad book. I just don't think it worked for me. Okay, so let's get to the books that I actually quite liked. The first one is going to be Frances Hodgson's Burnett. Oh my gosh, The Secret Garden. Not everything worked for me in this book. A lot of it has to do with the antiquatedness of the way that we think about others, the way that others are written, and the time period in which this was written. However, The Secret Garden tells the story of a young girl whose name is Mary. Her nickname is Mary quite contrary, which she's a bit curmudgeon. She's not someone fun to be around. And it's her story of finding agency, finding friendship, being a better person. There's this moment in which she was like, it's like she kind of comes to this realization that, people who are grumpy and angry aren't well liked. And it's like, well, yeah. You think? There were some really incredible moments. It was actually the first couple of chapters were the most surprising for me. So you could say that in a weird way it fell into that same pattern of the first part was stronger than the second part. Because I just didn't realize how this, excuse me, I didn't realize how this story started. And so as the story starts and as she gets to the place that she gets to, in which she discovers a hidden garden and starts to take ownership over herself and her relationships. I thought it was really, that it's like I didn't know that it was structured in that way and that the story was kicked off in the way that it was kicked off. And so the beginning was really surprising for me. But gosh, there are some really beautiful moments in this book. And there are some really lovely lines and some lovely paragraphs. And the story has a beautiful center to it. I just also think that there's this sort of, not strange, it's just, there was definitely this sense that the upper class of society has the right to think poorly about the lower class of society or those who sit with less wealth. That you can easily look down on them and say whatever you want. Now, I would say that it's coming out of the mouth of a child who is not likable. So, take that with a grain of salt. But sometimes reading that kind of stuff it just gives me the icks. Like, I don't like it. I don't like when just blatantly there is like, this talking down to someone because of their skin color, because of their class. I don't like that. And so there was a bit of that in there. But I also can understand that it's a different time period. It's being put in the mouth of a child who is awful. And so, it was not like a total home run, but it did work well. And I would encourage anybody who hasn't read this already to pick this up because it's just an incredibly sweet story. Even though, and it is a book of its time. And so reading it in that regard is always kind of interesting. It's like I am the historian. And now we have, in a lot of ways, moved past the way that we write about others. And so it's always kind of interesting to look back at moments where you know, it wouldn't fly now. Like some of the things in this book would not pass through the hands of publishers, I would hope, and be printed now. But it's always interesting to sort of revisit that, and those thoughts, and to ponder, you know, what's changed and why it's changed and how it's changed. So anyways, that's, you know, a very thought-provoking book, even if it wasn't 100% successful. All right, next we have this book was just such a delight in so many ways, and it makes me want to read more mid-century modern women because of how this was written. Anyways, it's I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith, I think it's Dodie Smith, not Dodie Smith. That sounds strange. But this follows the story of Cassandra, who is living in a decrepit castle with her father who is a writer, her artiste stepmother, and her sister. And it's comedic. It's got this incredible description of setting, which I loved. The setting was a character in and of itself. And I'm not spoiling it in the very beginning chapters. So the premise is that Cassandra is keeping a diary because she wants to be a writer. And she says in the very early bits of the book that she wants to capture her father, capture him on the page, a description of him that is accurate to who he is. And so this is why I Capture the Castle is like she's trying to give an accurate description of the place in which she lives. And I think that she does that quite well because this is like a comedy of errors. It's about growing up and the awkwardness of growing up and expressing what you want and holding on to childhood. And it's just everything. So if you are somebody who loves a lovely setting, a slower paced book that is broken up with some comedy, there is a bit of a love triangle amid the pages, and it's just a whole heck of a lot of fun. But if that sounds like a book that you would like, then I would definitely recommend this. And I think it's squarely for the fans of Anne of Green Gables, because it has similar themes written throughout. But yeah, just a delightful book. Again, I want to read more from women who write in this manner, that have a particular attention to descriptions and slowing down and the details in life. And then finally, my most successful read, which I've saved to last because, you know, I guess that's what I do now. But my favorite read of the month was The Story of a New Name by Elena Ferrante. This is the second book in her Neapolitan series, which is the series follows the narrator. Our narrator is Elena, who grew up in a very, very small town in Naples. And it is about her friendship with another girl in town who ended up taking a very, very different path from herself. And the young lady is Lila. And Lila, I would say, follows this path of getting married young and not educating herself. She follows a path that I would say is a bit more traditional for the women in the neighborhood in which they live, which is small and insular and a bit isolated from the outside world. And so we follow Elena, or Lenu and Lila's story from when they are children, and we get to the part where they're in their mid-20s. And it is incredible. It is incredible. I would say that one of the things that I love about this book is that I really like Elena as a narrator. She is not the most confident. She is very aware that she's telling her story with a slant. It's a skew to her own personal viewpoint on what happened. There are missing pieces to what's going on, and then sometimes she'll cycle back around and fill that in as she learned it in her life. So it's a bit circuitous, it is a bit meandering, and that is totally fine with me because this gives me the feeling of sitting down and having coffee and a really long conversation with someone who is incredibly dear to me. That is what this book feels like. Now, I would say that you really have to get along with Elena, because if you don't, I mean, she's the one telling the story. So if there's things that she's not, again, the most confident person, she's very doubtful of herself. Sometimes she's a bit negative. Sometimes she makes choices that I absolutely don't agree with, and I want to just give her a hug and tell her, like, it's okay. But I think that some of the things that would make me react like I want to give her a hug and tell her it's okay, I think for other readers, they're like, ugh, I don't like that. Or like, I just don't get it. And I totally respect that opinion. But, you know, in that way, it makes me just want to like embrace her and tell her that, like, you know, we all make mistakes in life, and there are confusing bits and things that don't make sense. And it's okay. It's okay, because life is messy. And so anyways, I just want to say that this was just highly successful. We are at this point where Lila is married to somebody who is incredibly unkind to her, and being that it's from Lenu's perspective, she is in a lot of ways at a loss of how to support her friend during this time. And what is support, and what is the right choice when things are very gray. So, like, it's morally gray. Anyway, so that's it. I'm going to stop rambling on about The Story of a New Name. It's beautiful. It's lovely. My plan is to finish the Neapolitan series this year and to continue on the Ferrante train, because I'm a fan. And that's it for me. Okay, so why did I put this at the end? Maybe I'll do a little insert. But anyways, what did you read this month that you loved? I would love to know. What were some, or in December rather, what were some highs? What were some lows? This was kind of all of what I read, and I really enjoyed it. That's it from me. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all in my next one. Bye, guys.